few years ago, my mom actually found this super old black and white photograph. And on the picture, you could see this like lady beautifully dressed, like, Sunday best, and standing on the largest French glacier called Mer de Glace, Sea of Ice. And I later understood that the picture was from 1916. And the lady on the picture was my great grandmother. And when I
Wow.
saw the picture, I realized, wow, hang on. It means that mountains and ice have been a part of my family for a very, very long time. This is truly a part of my roots, of my identity. And so today, when I see glaciers changing and receding and disappearing, it truly, truly breaks my heart. I feel like I lose family members every time a glacier disappears. And this is truly today what propels me to do the very best possible science, but also to be at the forefront of science communication.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of the Ecosystem Member Podcast. Our guest for this episode is glaciologist Dr. Heïdi Sevestre. You might recognize that name if you tuned in to the National Geographic series Arctic Ascent featuring climber Alex Honnold. Heidi was the scientist on that expedition and worked with the team to conduct 18 different experiments, many of which were featured in the show. And that appearance is a key part of Heidi's approach to science. In addition to being a fellow of the Explorers Club and working at AMAP, the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program, Heidi is a passionate science communicator. In addition to appearing on podcasts like this one, she has featured in documentaries for the BBC, CBC, ITV, France 2, and several other media platforms. In this episode, we talk about what a glaciologist actually does other than expeditions with world-famous climbers. We explore the connection between melting glaciers and ice sheets and climate change and sea level rise, and her Climate Sentinels project, which was an all-female carbon-neutral expedition to Svalbard to conduct crucial research. 2025 is the International Year for Glacier Preservation, and I think you'll walk away from this episode with a better understanding of the importance of glaciers and ice overall in our ecosystems really around the globe. Huge thanks to Heidi for joining us, and make sure to check out the links in the show notes to follow her latest expeditions and science communication efforts across the internet. Without further delay, here's the latest episode of the Ecosystem Member Podcast with a passionate glaciologist and science communicator, Dr. Heïdi Sevestre. Today on the Ecosystem Member Podcast, we are really excited to have Dr. Heïdi Sevestre, a passionate glaciologist. Thanks for joining us today, Heidi.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
So I want to start off with what's probably a super simple question, but for the benefit of myself and also listeners, what exactly does a glaciologist do?
No, I think this is such an important question, and thank you for asking it at the beginning of the conversation. So what we do as glaciologists is to study ice under all its forms, from sea ice to glaciers, from ice sheets to permafrost. We don't discriminate. We just love ice. And we try to understand how this ice is affected by climate change. Because obviously entire ecosystems, human lives, human communities are directly connected to snow and ice around the world. And I also feel that being a glaciologist in 2024 is also to communicate this science to a wide audience. Science has no impact if it's not communicated. So for us, it's not only crucial to produce the very best possible science, but also to make sure that the whole world understands how precious snow and ice is around the world today.
Fantastic. I love that idea of communicating and making sure that it's accessible for the sort of average person. And a really good example of how you've engaged in that is probably definitely where I found out about your work, and where I imagine a lot of people have found out about your work, is the National Geographic Arctic Ascent series, founded on Disney Plus with Alex Honnold, who, a free solo fame of all these other amazing climbing documentaries. And I think that might make you sort of the most well-known glaciologist in the world, at least by sort of the general public in population, which definitely helps with communicating those messages. But I did read on your Instagram that during that trip, you did 15 different experiments from multiple institutions. So it really did have, it wasn't just for show. There was actual scientific research going on in that trip. So it was a great opportunity to communicate, but also gather more data. And then you've also done this Climate Sentinels expedition, which, I'd love to hear more about, of all female scientists to conduct climate research. So maybe is being a glaciologist like the secret path to an adventurous life? Like, are people missing out on something by not becoming glaciologists?
It is truly a secret hack. Absolutely. One of the main reasons why I became a glaciologist was to have the chance to travel around the world and to be some kind of an explorer, traveling to these remote corners of the world and studying them, conducting these sort of police investigations to make these glaciers talk to us. And, lately I've been so incredibly privileged to be able to join these crazy expeditions. I mean, come on, like joining Alex, Hazel, Aldo, Mikey on this 2-month-long Greenland expedition for Nat Geo was truly a dream come true. And you're right. I mean, we didn't just go to Greenland to just film a series of documentaries. We spent a year actually drawing up the science we were going to do on that expedition. So it took a huge amount of work. And we collaborated with 12 different research institutes on this project. And it wasn't just 15, it was 18 different projects, different experiments. But 2 of them didn't work because of science. This is how it works in the field. You always start with plan A and then you always end up with plan D, plan E. But in the end, we produced tremendous science and we collected data on fjords. We collected rock samples on these crazy towering cliffs. We measured the thickness of glaciers. And to be fair, to me, it was incredible to be surrounded by what was probably the fittest and most capable team I've ever been able to work with. But more than just collecting great science, I think this project also helped to share a very impactful message on the collaborations we can build between athletes, between climbers and scientists. And when these communities come together, we can really, truly make magic happen. So I really hope it will inspire hikers, climbers, to connect with their local scientists and collect data on their behalf, because we need more data. And you also mentioned Climate Sentinels, and I really appreciate it. This is an expedition I led a few years ago. I put together kind of my dream team of female scientists, and together we skied over, I think it was 450 kilometers on a really remote archipelago called Svalbard. It's about 1,000 kilometers away from the North Pole. And this is today the fastest warming place on Earth. And by conducting an expedition there, we were trying to understand what are the drivers to the melting of snow and ice there. And we tried to lower our carbon footprint as much as possible. So this is why we were traveling on skis for an entire month. And the conditions we experimented on this expedition were horrendous. We had the worst conditions I've ever seen in the Arctic. And I truly felt that we were witnessing the Arctic of the future, really unstable weather patterns, huge avalanches, really weak snow bridges over glaciers. So it was so dangerous just to be there. But both of these expeditions have confirmed to me, the need to communicate the science to the masses. And both Arctic Ascent and Climate Sentinels have had a really big reach. And hopefully we've been able to convince, more people that not only these remote corners of the world are incredibly important, but also that we can do something about it, not just to collect the best possible data, but together we can truly make a difference. It's not too late to save Svalbard, to save Greenland, but in order to do that, we truly need everyone.
And it was interesting, you just mentioned some of the extreme conditions that you're experiencing in this Arctic of the future, being more unstable. And, even everyday people are experiencing more unstable weather conditions and weather patterns and things like that. So it sounds kind of a little bit of a joke, but it's also kind of serious. In Arctic Ascent, Alex Honnold like goes down into, I think it was called a Mulan or a Moulin or something like that to help gather samples. And like, does this collaboration sort of with these adventurous people fit for these places? Is that going to be like a requirement to actually be able to do the science in the future, to like collect the data and the samples?
Well, that's such a good question. Of course, when you're a glaciologist and want to collect data on glaciers, you need certain skills. You need to do a little bit of skiing, you need to be able to climb a little bit, do a little bit of mountaineering. But at some points, you start to realize that in order to collect rock samples at the top of towering cliffs, you need much more than being able to do a little bit of climbing. You need some of the best climbers in the world. And so in Greenland, believe me, we made the most of having the very best climbers in the world with us. And I would not have been able to collect all the samples I needed to collect if it wasn't for Alex, for Hazel, for Mikey, for Aldo. Thanks to them, we were able to do things that normal scientists like me wouldn't have been able to do. So hopefully, again, it will inspire more athletes to team up with scientists in order to collect these data that we so desperately need. And the reason why I joined Alex to Greenland is because Alex requested that on his expedition to Greenland, there would be a scientist. And I think this shows so much leadership. Someone like Alex Honnold is such a big inspiration to me. He's built the Alex Honnold Foundation. He's doing tremendous work in underprivileged communities, bringing them solar panels, bringing them renewable energy. And he was really able to instill, this enthusiasm for science in the entire team. So I never felt that I had to convince people in Greenland that it was important to do science. He was so excited every day about the science we were doing that the entire team was surrounding me and asking me every day, okay, how can we help you to collect the best possible data? And I'm so proud of what we've been able to do.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. And I hope to see more of the, sort of large outdoor industry brands. Alex works with the North Face, but you've got Patagonia and Nerona and all these other amazing brands that I think partnering some of the athletes they sponsor with scientists and making it a part of their expeditions and the way that they use and test the product could be really fantastic. And it's interesting to see because I watched a couple of your videos. I think there was one that the Shackleton Prize when you won that in 2022, talking about your experience, growing up in the Alps. And now you're a glaciologist. You're going into these often extreme conditions, but you're also seeing firsthand how these glaciers are changing as a result of planetary warming, climate change. So like how, as a scientist, but also as someone who's like has a deep love of the outdoors and ice, like how do you think about your relationship with nature and the more than human world? Has that changed as you've done more of these expeditions?
Yeah, absolutely. Mountains and glaciers have always been a part of who I am. I'll tell you a funny story. Like a few years ago, my mom actually found this super old black and white photograph. And on the picture, you could see this like lady beautifully dressed, like Sunday best, and standing on the largest French glacier called Mer de Glace, Sea of Ice. And I later understood that the picture was from 1916. And the lady on the picture was my great grandmother. And when I saw the picture, I realized, wow, hang on. It means that mountains and ice have been a part of my family for a very, very long time. This is truly a part of my roots, of my identity. And so today, when I see glaciers changing and receding and disappearing, it truly, truly breaks my heart. I feel like I lose family members every time a glacier disappears. And this is truly today what propels me to do the very best possible science, but also to be at the forefront of science communication. And really, and sometimes, believe me, it's very difficult to be kind of a public person talking about climate change. You face tremendous odds and a lot of negativity on social media. But I always remind myself of why I do it. Why do I want everyone to fall in love with these glaciers? Why do I want everyone to understand that it is not too late to save them because they're part of who I am. And, I'm actually a very introverted person. I'm very shy, in my day-to-day life. But this truly gives me the energy and the stamina to be out there, in the public arenas and to communicate science to everyone. And I will never give up because I know that, protecting glaciers is not just about protecting beautiful environments, but it's truly about preserving human lives. And so this is why we study glaciers. This is why we communicate climate science, because in the end, we try to preserve as many human lives as possible.
Yeah, yeah. In Arctic Ascent, you actually say, if we save the Arctic, we will save ourselves. And so, thinking about that human relationship and why our lives and day-to-day is sort of impacted by glaciers, why exactly, like sort of the baseline science, why should we be worried that glaciers are melting at an increasingly rapid pace?
Yeah, Rick, this is the most important question. Why should we even care about these really remote corners of the world? Why should we care about pieces of ice we've never seen before, right? This is the case for 99.9% of the population around the world. Most of the people have never seen an iceberg, have never seen glaciers. So we need to explain to them that these pieces of ice are very important. So when we talk about mountain glaciers, for example, what we would find in Canada, in Alaska, parts of the US, in the European Alps, in the Himalaya, these glaciers are some of the best water towers we have on the entire planet. Glaciers store water, and during the dry seasons, during the summer months, some of this ice will melt and it will release fresh water. And today, I mean, this is a crazy number, but almost 2 billion people on Earth use the fresh water from glaciers to drink, to irrigate crops, to produce hydroelectricity. Believe me, in France, we care because we also cool down nuclear power plants in the summer months using some of the meltwater from glaciers. So 2 billion people, almost 2 billion people in the world, depend on this seasonal source of fresh water. So this is so very important. But it's not just mountain glaciers. There is another major concern, and this is the melting of the big ice sheets we have on Earth. So we were just talking about Greenland. Greenland is a very large ice sheet. Greenland holds enough ice to increase sea levels by 6 to 7 meters, so almost 24 feet. I mean, this is crazy. But when you look at Antarctica around the South Pole, Antarctica holds enough ice to increase sea levels by 58 meters. So it's almost, 160 feet? It's crazy, right? And at the moment, both Greenland and Antarctica respond very, very quickly to climate change. I'll give you some more numbers, but Greenland at the moment loses about 30 million tons of ice every hour throughout the year. I mean, it's crazy. And in the world, that we have some of the most densely populated cities on the coastlines. This is where we have the most thriving economic regions of the world. This is where we have most of our harbors, of course, our airports as well. Incredible infrastructure we so directly depend on. So today there are 700 million people who live between 0 and 10 meters of elevation on coastlines. And this is also why we care. It's to make sure that we protect these populations for as long as possible, but also that we help them anticipate the changes that will happen. If we do not stop burning fossil fuels, if we do not stop investing in fossil fuels today, there will be hundreds of millions of people displaced because of sea level rise, displaced because of extreme weather events, displaced because of climate change. So this is basically why we care so much about ice today, because ice helps us to stabilize our entire climate system, but also because of the freshwater resources it holds, and also because of sea level rise. So this is truly why we should care.
You mentioned a couple of times about communicating the science, and it's interesting. You've got your academic background, obviously, to become a glaciologist. Like, you got your PhD, you did a postdoc at the University of St. Andrews, and you're still involved in a lot of research, obviously, as we've talked about, even though you're sort of outside the traditional academic path. So when you look at the science communicating and needing to get this out of the world, like why did you choose to go in this direction versus, staying at a university and going through, I guess, a more traditional route of research and publishing that research and through universities?
Yeah, absolutely. Today I'm very lucky to work with a team at AMAP, at the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program, that truly understands the value of science communication and science outreach. And thanks to this team, I'm able to keep one foot into research, but also one foot in science communication. And so throughout the year, they will really help me to juggle all these different jobs, all these different hats that I wear. I spend parts of the year helping with international meetings, international negotiations, focusing on climate issues. I help with my team to coordinate climate research in the Arctic and to communicate it to the governments, mostly governments of the Arctic. But also besides that, I'm able to lead and participate in my own expeditions and to do science communication in the way I want to do it today. I think I feel really strongly today about the fact that for most academics, science communication is actually not valued at all. It's actually more detrimental to your career to do science communication than not to do it. Today, science has no impact if it's not communicated. So we should really help academics where they are in their own universities, in their own research labs, to have the flexibility and the freedom to do science communication, but also to make sure that this helps progress their careers. Luckily, I've been able to kind of build this weird position that I'm in today, that gives me all the freedom and flexibility I need in order to reach out to the private sector, to the general public, to governments around the world, and help them understand, again, why they should care. So the advice I would give to other scientists and other academics is to try and explain to their own research lab, to their own university, that it is in their interest also to do science communication. It will help to put their university and research lab under a spotlight and help the general public understand that their taxpayers' money is being used to help protect human lives as much as we can. So science communication is such a big part of who I am today. And again, I'm so eternally grateful to my team that they gave me all that time and all that care in order for me to do science communication. It's not easy. It's never easy to do it. But again, we know why we do it. And we will not give up. We will continue sharing the science to everyone. And we need to explain, not only what we might lose if we do not preserve these environments, but what we have to gain from fighting climate change. It's good for our health. It's good for our economies. It's good for national securities, for energy independence. There are so many good reasons why we should fight the climate crisis. This is also important arguments we should put forward when we communicate on climate change.
Totally. And so we've talked about some of your amazing adventures, your goals with science communication. I know you were recently visiting the tropical glaciers in Uganda, which I think might be a surprising place for glaciers to many listeners. But where's your next adventure? Like, what's next on your map? And I think this would be really interesting for folks who want to follow you after our episode ends after this question, but who want to follow your adventures. Where are you headed next?
Oh, I'm always looking forward to the next expedition. And actually, the next expedition will probably be going back to Uganda. I've just come back from Uganda just a few weeks ago. We have this tremendous collaboration between UNESCO and the Uganda Wildlife Authority and a fantastic NGO called Project Pressure. And together, what we try to do is not only to help map the glaciers of Uganda, because there are tiny, tiny glaciers super high up in the mountains of the moon. These are some of the most permanent and highest sources of the River Nile. But not only we want to help to do the science, the best possible science in these environments, we want to help communities do the science they need. So we're hoping to go back to Uganda probably early next year to donate some equipment and do a lot of capacity building with the local scientists, the local guides and communities, because eventually, we don't want them to call us every time they need scientists. We want them to produce the very best possible science. So I'm so eager to continue working on this project with Project Pressure, Uganda Wildlife Authority and UNESCO. And Rick, next year is the International Year for Glacier Preservation. So this is why our expedition is a part of this fantastic year. There will be a lot of events, a lot of adventures to follow next year. So people, keep your eyes peeled, keep watching this space. There will be a lot happening next year on glaciers around the world.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we'll include links to all of your social media accounts, Instagram, YouTube, also your website, to make sure people can find where your latest work is going on. So thanks so much, Heidi, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. It was fantastic to get to chat with you.
Thank you so much, Rick. Really appreciate it. Thank you.